Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night knowing something was wrong? Not just feeling it, but knowing it in your bones. That's what happened to me 3 years ago when I heard footsteps circling our tent at 2 in the morning. 5 miles deep in the wilderness. No cell service. No help. Just me and my best friend Marcus and someone outside breathing heavily, whispering hello in there. I want to tell you about something that happened to me and my best friend Marcus 3 years ago. Something that still keeps me up at night. Something that made me never want to go camping again. The night we found a stranger watching our tent. I want to tell you about something that happened to me and my best friend Marcus 3 years ago. Something that still keeps me up at night. Something that made me never want to go camping again. It was late August 2021. Marcus and I had just finished our sophomore year of college, and we wanted one last adventure before heading back to campus. We'd been talking about doing a camping trip in the Cascade Mountains for months. Nothing too extreme. Just a couple of guys wanting to disconnect from our phones and spend a few nights under the stars. We chose a spot called Copper Ridge Trail. It's this beautiful area about 2 hours outside of Seattle. Not super remote, but not exactly crowded either. The kind of place where you might see a handful of other hikers during the day but have the nights pretty much to yourself. That's what we wanted. Peace and quiet. We left on a Thursday morning. I remember it was one of those perfect summer days. Not too hot. The sky was this brilliant blue with just a few wispy clouds. Marcus was driving his old Jeep, and we had the windows down the whole way there. We were blasting music and laughing about stupid stuff from the previous semester. Everything felt right. Everything felt safe. We hit the trailhead around noon and started our hike in. The plan was to camp about 5 miles in at this clearing we'd seen on the trail maps. Far enough to feel like we were really out there, but not so far that we'd kill ourselves getting to it. We were both in decent shape, but we weren't exactly experienced backpackers. The hike in was amazing. The trail wound through these massive Douglas firs, and the air smelled like pine and earth. We saw a few other people on the trail. Couple with their dog. An older guy with one of those fancy cameras taking pictures of birds. Everyone was friendly. Everyone seemed normal. We finally reached our spot around 4 in the afternoon. The clearing was perfect. It was this flat area surrounded by trees with a view of the mountains in the distance. There was a fire ring from previous campers and enough space to set up our tent with room to spare. We could hear a stream nearby, which meant fresh water. Marcus actually hooped when we got there. That's how excited he was. We spent the next couple of hours setting up camp. We weren't experts, but we managed to get the tent up without too much trouble. It was one of those cheap 4-person tents from a sporting goods store. Blue and gray. The kind that probably wouldn't hold up in a serious storm but was fine for summer camping. We gathered firewood and set up our cooking area. We filtered water from the stream. We were feeling pretty proud of ourselves. The sun started setting around 8 and we got a fire going. We cooked hot dogs and beans. Not gourmet, but it tasted incredible after the hike. We sat there talking and watching the flames. The temperature dropped as it got darker, but the fire kept us warm. Marcus brought a flask of whiskey and we passed it back and forth. Nothing crazy. Just enough to feel relaxed and happy. I remember looking up at the stars that night. You don't see stars like that in the city. It was like someone had thrown diamonds across black velvet. The Milky Way was actually visible. We could hear the stream and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. An owl was hooting somewhere in the distance. It was peaceful. It was exactly what we'd hoped for. We stayed up until about midnight. The fire had died down to embers and we were both getting tired. Marcus yawned and said he was ready to crash. We made sure the fire was completely out. We hung our food bag in a tree like we were supposed to. We brushed our teeth with water from our bottles. Then we climbed into the tent and zipped it shut. The tent had 2 sleeping bags laid out side by side. We each had a small pillow and a flashlight. Marcus fell asleep almost immediately. I could hear him breathing deeply within minutes. I always took longer to fall asleep. My mind likes to wander. I lay there in the dark listening to the sounds outside. The stream, the wind, the occasional crack of a branch. Normal forest sounds. I wasn't scared. I was comfortable. I remember thinking about how we should do this more often. How we should make it a tradition. I must have dozed off around 1 in the morning. I don't know exactly what time it was when I woke up, but it felt like I'd been asleep for maybe an hour. Something had pulled me out of sleep. I lay there for a minute trying to figure out what it was. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Someone was walking around our campsite. At first I thought maybe it was an animal, a deer or something, but the footsteps were too deliberate, too heavy. They were the unmistakable sound of boots on dirt and pine needles. Someone was out there. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps circled around the tent slowly. They stopped for a moment near the front entrance. Then they continued around the side. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be particularly quiet, but they weren't stomping around either. It was like they were casually inspecting our campsite. I reached over and shook Marcus. He groaned and mumbled something. I shook him harder and whispered his name. He finally opened his eyes and looked at me confused. I put my finger to my lips and pointed toward the tent wall. He listened. The footsteps continued. They were at the back of the tent now. Marcus's eyes went wide. He grabbed his flashlight, but I shook my head. I don't know why, but turning on the light felt like a bad idea. Like acknowledging we knew someone was there would make things worse. We lay there frozen listening to this person walk around our tent. Around and around. It felt like it went on forever, but it was probably only a few minutes. Then the footsteps stopped. Right in front of the tent entrance. I could hear breathing. Heavy breathing. Not like someone who was out of breath from hiking, but like someone breathing hard on purpose. Like they wanted us to hear them. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Marcus had grabbed my arm and was squeezing it so tight it hurt. Then we heard it. A voice. Low and rough and right outside the tent. "Hello in there." Those 3 words. That's all he said. Hello in there. Like this was a normal thing. Like he was a neighbor dropping by. But his tone wasn't friendly. It was mocking. Amused. Like he was enjoying our fear. Marcus and I didn't respond. We barely breathed. We just lay there in the dark hoping this person would leave. Hoping this was some kind of weird hiker with boundary issues who would move on. The breathing continued for another minute. Then the footsteps started again. But this time they weren't walking away. They were pacing back and forth in front of the tent entrance. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like whoever it was thinking. Deciding something. Then we heard a different sound. Something dragging across the tent fabric. I realized with horror that it was fingers. This person was running their fingers along the outside of our tent. Slowly, deliberately, from one side to the other. I could see the fabric moving slightly as the fingers pressed against it. Marcus was shaking next to me. I was trying to think, trying to figure out what to do. Should we yell? Should we turn on the light? Should we try to run? None of the options seemed good. We were in a tent. A flimsy nylon tent with just a zipper between us and whoever was out there. The fingers stopped. The footsteps started again. But this time they were moving away, getting fainter. We listened as whoever it was walked away from our campsite. The sounds faded into the forest until we couldn't hear them anymore. We lay there in silence for a long time. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. I was counting seconds in my head, trying to calculate how long it had been since we'd heard anything. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. Finally, Marcus whispered. What the hell was that? I didn't answer because I didn't know. Someone had found our campsite in the middle of the night, had walked around our tent, had tried to scare us. But why? Who does that? We need to leave, Marcus said. His voice was still a whisper, but it was urgent. We need to pack up and get out of here right now. I wanted to agree. Every part of me wanted to agree, but I was also thinking about practicality. It was the middle of the night. We were 5 miles from the trailhead. The trail was rocky and uneven. Hiking in the dark was dangerous. What if this person was waiting out there? What if leaving the tent was exactly what they wanted? I don't think we should move, I whispered back. I think we should wait until sunrise. Stay in the tent. Stay quiet. If we hear anything else, we call for help. We both had our phones, but the service out there was spotty at best. Marcus checked his. No signal. Mine was the same. We were on our own. We decided to stay put. We agreed that we'd take turns keeping watch. Marcus would stay awake for 2 hours while I tried to sleep. Then we'd switch. But neither of us slept. We just lay there in the dark listening to every sound. Every crack of a branch. Every rustle of leaves. Every whisper of wind. Around 3 in the morning we heard the footsteps again. This time they were different. Faster. More aggressive. They came straight to the tent and stopped at the entrance. Then we heard hands on the zipper. Someone was trying to open our tent. Marcus yelled, "Get away from us. Leave us alone." The hands stopped. There was a laugh, a low chuckle that made my blood run cold. Then the voice again. I just wanted to see if you boys needed anything. It's cold out here tonight. The voice was different now, still mocking but with an edge of anger. Like we'd offended him by not being more welcoming. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and turned it on. He pointed it at the tent entrance. We could see a shadow through the fabric. A large shadow. Someone tall and broad-shouldered was standing right outside. "We have phones," I shouted. "We already called the Rangers. They're on their way." It was a lie, but I hoped it would work. The shadow didn't move. For a long moment nothing happened. Then we heard that laugh again. "No, you didn't. There's no signal out here. I know these mountains. I know every trail, every campsite, and I know when city boys come out here thinking they can handle the wilderness." The shadow moved closer. The fabric of the tent pressed inward like he was leaning against it. Marcus and I scrambled backward, pressing ourselves against the far wall. "Tell you what the voice said. I'm going to give you until sunrise to pack up and leave. If you're still here when the sun comes up, I'm coming in. And we're going to have ourselves a real conversation." Then the footsteps walked away again. But this time we heard them stop maybe 30 feet from the tent. We could see a light through the trees. He had a flashlight or a lantern, and he was sitting out there, watching us. That was it. We didn't care about waiting for sunrise anymore. We didn't care about hiking in the dark. We had to get out of there. We moved as quickly and quietly as we could. We shoved our sleeping bags into our backpacks. We grabbed our essentials. We didn't bother with the tent. We left it standing there. All we cared about was getting away from this person. Marcus unzipped the entrance slowly. We both held our breath, expecting the person to rush us. But nothing happened. We could still see the light in the trees. Watching, we stepped out of the tent and grabbed our packs. I still had my flashlight, but I kept it pointed at the ground. We needed light to see the trail, but I didn't want to make us obvious targets. We started walking. Fast. Not quite running, but close. The trail was rough and we stumbled a few times, but we didn't stop. Behind us we could hear movement. Branches breaking. Footsteps. He was following us. We moved faster. My lungs were burning and my legs were screaming, but I didn't care. Marcus was right behind me. I could hear his breathing. We just had to make it to the trailhead, to the parking lot, to civilization. The hike that had taken us 3 hours in daylight took us barely 90 minutes in our panicked flight. We could still hear him behind us occasionally. Never close enough to see clearly, but close enough to know he was there, hurting us, playing with us. When we finally burst out of the trees and saw the parking lot, I almost cried. Marcus's Jeep was sitting there exactly where we'd left it. We ran to it and threw our packs in the back. Marcus fumbled with his keys, and I kept looking back at the trailhead, expecting to see someone emerge from the darkness. The Jeep started and Marcus tore out of there like he was in a race. We didn't say anything for the first 10 minutes. We just drove, putting distance between us and that place. Finally, when we hit the main highway, Marcus pulled over. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't drive anymore. We sat there on the side of the road as the sun started to rise, and we just looked at each other. We should call someone, Marcus said. The police. The rangers. Someone. We did. We pulled into a gas station and called the local sheriff's office. We told them everything. They took our information and said they'd send someone to check the area. They asked if we wanted to file a formal report. We said yes. 2 days later, a deputy called us back. They'd searched the area. They'd found our tent still standing right where we left it. But there was no sign of anyone else. No footprints except ours. No evidence that anyone had been there. The deputy said it was possible someone was messing with us. Maybe another hiker with a sick sense of humor. Maybe someone who lived in the area and liked scaring tourists. But without evidence, there wasn't much they could do. He suggested we not camp in that area again. We never did. Marcus and I haven't been camping since that night. We barely talk about it. When we do, we always come back to the same questions. Who was that person? Why did they target us? What would have happened if we'd stayed until sunrise? I think about those questions a lot, especially late at night when I'm trying to sleep. I think about that voice saying hello in there. I think about the fingers dragging across the tent. I think about the shadow pressing against the fabric. But mostly I think about what the deputy said, about there being no footprints except ours. Because if that's true, then who was standing outside our tent that night? Who was breathing heavily and laughing and threatening us? Who followed us through 5 miles of dark forest? I don't have answers. All I know is that something was out there with us that night. Something that enjoyed our fear. Something that wanted us to know we weren't safe. I never found out what happened to the tent we left behind. I never went back to get it. As far as I'm concerned, it can stay out there forever. Because I'm never going back to Copper Ridge Trail. I'm never going back to find out what was really watching us that night. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some places are better left alone. And some camping trips should never have happened in the first place. If you've ever had a similar experience camping, or if you've ever felt like you were being watched in the wilderness, I want to hear about it. Leave your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep bringing you more true horror stories every week. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thanks for listening, and remember to stay safe out there. You never know who or what might be watching from the shadows.